All right, looks like we've got most people in from the waiting room now, so I'll go ahead and start with the welcome uh, and start with my segment of it. So, hi, my name is Eli Conwest. I direct the Center for the Study of Global Change at Indiana University Bloomington. Thank you all for joining us today about this panel entitled Exploring Librarianship as a Profession 2024. And I think we have a very exciting group of scholars and librarians joining us here today. And I want to thank them all for joining us and spending some time on Zoom from across the country into this session. And I want to thank Charmaine Henriquez here at Indiana University Bloomington Libraries for organizing the panel today and working with the Center for the Study of Global Change on the panel. So thanks so much to her for really driving the panel today and organizing it and inviting such a great selection of panelists today. At the Center for the Study of Global Change, we're a national resource center designated by the U.S. Department of Education. So what that means is we promote global studies and international studies in all across the country and working with many different constituents. So we're excited that careers and libraries and scholarship is a part of that today. I will also invite you to take a look at the excellent resources provided by the IU libraries around those subjects of global studies and area studies as well. There's an excellent selection of resources available to people nationwide, and I will share some links after I'm done speaking with you in the chat for you to peruse. But we have an excellent, if you are at IU, I would definitely encourage you to peruse those resources available on a variety of topics and subject matters, linking global studies to other disciplines as well. So I will share those. And if you're not at IU, there's also some great bibliographies and other resources around librarianship and global learning available and free to access nationwide. So I will share those links in the chat when I am done. I am going to very quickly turn it over now. I'm going to introduce our moderator today, and Dr. Tiffeni Fontno is joining us she directs the Peabody Library and is the Gene and Alexander Hurd Libraries at Vanderbilt University. So, within higher education, Dr. Fontno has served as the government documents librarian at the University of Illinois, Chicago, business librarian and collections manager at Case Western Reserve University, reference and instruction librarian and liaison to the education department at Lesley University, and the head librarian for Education Resource Center at Boston College. In the career outside of academia, Dr. Fontno has been an elementary school instructor and learning resource center teacher. She holds a BA in history from Ursuline College, an MSL from Kent State University, a master's degree in education from John Carroll University, and a doctorate of education from the University of Dayton.
Yeah.
So, welcome so much.
I pulled out the headphones. Now what?
And if everyone who's in the audience can make sure that they are muted, and Megan Strawn, who's at the Global Center, she can also help with that. Megan, if you could mute folks who aren't muted, that would be helpful. But now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Fontno, who will be moderating this session and introducing the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel.
On the computer?
Exploring Librarianship as
Hey, Tiffeni, could you unmute your mic, please?
Was I muted the whole time?
No, I had to mute
Okay,
all and it muted right after you started talking.
Very good. So I'll just start with saying in the first hour, our esteemed panelists will share their extensive experiences, insights, and expertise on librarianship. And the last 30 minutes are dedicated to your engagement. Please feel free to use the chat for general comments and greetings. And let's first do that by using the chat to share why you decided to attend today's discussion on librarianship. What is it about librarianship or this discussion that piqued your interest? Could you please share with us? And while you do that, I also want to let you know that as we get further into the panelist discussion, if you have any questions related to the presentation, panelists, or the landscape of librarianship, please feel free to use the Q&A feature. I will use that later on after the panel discussion to answer, speak on your questions and let the panelists answer them. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panelists for today's discussion on exploring librarianship. Each of these individuals brings a wealth of expertise and experience to the table, making our discussion today all the more enriching. First, we have Alyssa Denneler. Could you wave for us, Alyssa, so people see you? There you go. Thank you. A Scholars Commons librarian from Herman B. Wells Library, Indiana University. As Scholars Commons librarian, Alyssa builds community for graduate students. To do this, she engages with colleagues inside and outside of the libraries to host exhibitions, events, and workshops. As a reference librarian, she routinely teaches citation management, literature review, and multidisciplinary research skills. Alyssa received a bachelor's degree in anthropology from the University of Kansas and her master's of library and information science degree from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Next, we have Katie Gibson. Thank you, Katie. She's a humanities librarian at King Library, Miami University. She is subject specialist and librarian liaison to the programs and departments of Asian American Studies, Black World Studies, Latin American Studies, Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies, International Studies, French, German, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, and also the liaison for accessibility. She holds a Master's of Library Science degree from Indiana University and a bachelor's degree in philosophy, interdisciplinary studies from Miami University. Our third panelist, Mr. Todd Hampton. Thank you, Todd. He is an information literacy coordinator at Gateway Community College Library, Gateway Community College. Todd received his Master's of Library Science degree from Southern Connecticut State University and a bachelor's degree in business management from Eastern Connecticut State University. Prior to his arrival at Gateway Community College, he was a reference librarian at Norwalk Community College and a community librarian at Hartford Public Library. Currently, Todd is working on his dissertation in education leadership and administration at Central Connecticut University. And finally, we welcome Mr. Jesse Silva, Scholarly Resources Strategy and Federal Government Information Librarian at Charles F. Doe Library, University of California, Berkeley. Jesse holds a BA in Community Studies and Sociology from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and a Master's of Library and Information Science degree from San Jose State University. Jesse has worked at UC Santa Cruz, San Jose State, Innovative Interfaces, the University of North Texas, and UC Berkeley, where he was a subject specialist for legal studies, public policy, political science, and government information. In his current role, he continues to work in government information and as the Scholarly Resources Strategy Librarian, which focuses on building collections in all formats and subjects across the UC Berkeley libraries. We are grateful to have such a distinguished group of experts sharing their insights with us today. And without further ado, let's dive into our discussion. Okay, so the first question is for all of the panelists. Please tell us your journey into librarianship. What drew you to it? And can you give a brief description of what you currently do? If we could go like Alyssa, Todd, Katie, and Jesse, please.
I was just talking to a student recently, and we were discussing how very few people do you meet, and they're like, I was 2 years old and I wanted to be a librarian or whatever. So I think a lot of us had a kind of winding path to the career. I thought I was going to be an archaeologist. And I tried some field work and it was awesome. I really liked it, but I decided I wanted to continue to be involved in research in another way. So when I was an undergrad, I talked to a couple librarians. I talked to a public librarian. I talked to an academic librarian, and ultimately decided to apply to library schools, which, as will probably be discussed today, is the path to librarianship. I also thought about like museum studies and higher education administration, but ultimately this just felt like the best fit for me. And I did also like tour the graduate schools that I was admitted to. I know that's not required, but it kind of helped me to make my decision. Yeah, and I think we've already kind of discussed what I do, but I'm a generalist. So a lot of, at IU in particular, and a lot of places, a lot of librarians have kind of like a disciplinary area that they cover. So we have folks like that. And then we also have folks like me where I work with all disciplines, but in more functional areas like citation management, evidence synthesis, and things like that. And in grad school, I also worked in reference. So once I got to grad school, my career was pretty direct into my current position. And this is my first position out of grad school. So we'll see what happens in the future.
So my path to librarianship is probably is winding as everyone else's. I originally started out as a business major when I graduated from college, and I originally had planned to do that. And when I graduated, I wasn't able to kind of find the work I was looking for, and I kind of searched around. It was kind of a recession at the time, so jobs in my field were kind of hard to come by. And at that time, someone suggested, I spoke with maybe a mentor, I'm not sure his name, but he mentioned start to consider library school. I didn't think about it. So I kind of did other things, worked different jobs, temp jobs, whatever. And while I was doing one of these different temp jobs, a girlfriend of mine mentioned that there was a program for librarianship, actually a scholarship program. So I applied for it, figuring, let me just try and see what happens. I got in, and I actually met Charmaine through there. We both went to school together in grade school. And it kind of, when I got accepted to the program, I got my library degree, and I kind of was thrown in sort of head first, I guess, into the deep end. And, I really sort of like it. I enjoyed it. It was part of something that I really, that piqued my interest. It worked for my interest. When I graduated, I started working in the public library, and I worked at public library for a while. I sort of worked at general public library reference, answering reference questions. Eventually, they kind of had a performing arts department, which is kind of my area of interest. I was interested in performing arts. And at the time, I was into music. When I was in college, and I kind of got involved with that. From there, I went to Hartford, and I kind of went from just a regular reference librarian to a community librarian, which is more community-based. I did a lot of community work with the community members, community associations, more management type of style material there. I did that for a couple of years, and then from there, I went to where I'm at now, which is the CSU system, well, the community college system. And I've been doing that roughly for the past 19 years, pretty much. Much of it is working with obviously community college students, faculty, and staff. I kind of work with a variety of different patrons or people in that field. My current position is mostly dealing with instruction, so I do a lot of instruction to teaching classes, but I also am person in charge of assigning instruction, so setting up our library instruction program. So that sort of a weird way I kind of get into it. Sort of weird. I didn't plan to wind up here. I just wound up here in kind of in a roundabout way. But I'm glad I'm here.
I think I'm one of the rare people who knew I wanted to be a librarian fairly young. I was in high school. My mom was a school librarian, and I kind of grew up in libraries, so I knew that was an option as a career. As an adult, I worked in libraries during college, and that sort of is what turned me on to the academic library environment. And that really drew me in with like the intellectual curiosity of the academic environment. I get to help students and faculty with like such a wide range of research. And oftentimes I'm like learning along with people as they do the research, which is really fun for me. I buy books in a broad range of subjects, and I get to use my Spanish, my background is Latin American studies, to do that. And I've been forced to learn new things along the way as areas get added to my job responsibilities, which I've very much enjoyed. I've been in my current position for almost 17 years. And so like this is a medium-sized state university. So as you heard from my long list of liaison responsibilities, I do a little bit of everything. And like, for example, like serving as the accessibility librarian, that's one of those areas that got added to my position and has sort of forced me to learn along the way, which is like, I really enjoy that chance to dive into learning something new. So that is a profession that's really what has drawn me to librarianship.
Hi, everyone. So I took a kind of a meandering way to librarianship, but kind of not. When I graduated from college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I was working in the undergraduate library at UC Santa Cruz doing shelving books. And my boss at the time was like, "Hey, you're graduating soon. There's a job opening up at on the other side of the floor in government documents and law. You should apply for it. Give you an idea of something to do, make some money, and figure out what you want to do next." And I thought about it for a week or so, and then I said, "Okay," I applied. And I got interviewed 2 weeks before I graduated, and then a week and a half later, I got the job offer. I started working as a staff person in the library. And it was kind of interesting just seeing what the library, how that side of the library worked. It was more reference, working with students, not just shelving books. And I made friends with a woman who was working in the reference department. And she was going to library school. And she and I started talking about what library school was and what library school was like. And San Jose State had a program at the time where you could pay like $100 and you can take a class and it counts towards your degree if you decide to do it. So I decided to do that and took the class, was really interested in it. We talked about things that I'd never thought about before, how information impacts us all, different ways to look at information and how we provide service around information. And it just kind of like stuck with me. And then September 11th happened. And for those of who were working in government information at the time, the government pulled lots of material off the web and made it inaccessible. And for researchers needing information, that was a problem. And I saw on these listservs and things that I was participating in as part of my job, all this discussion about we need to fight this, we need to change this. And it motivated me. My undergrad degree is in community studies, which is the study of social change and activism. And it was all that activism around this information providing that wasn't really apparent as if you're looking from outside of the library looking in. I think it's a little more apparent now considering what's going on with book bannings, but at the time that wasn't the case. So I ended up applying to the San Jose State, got my degree there, ended up working for a software company after I graduated. The software company was Innovative Interfaces. I got to travel around the country during the year and a half that I worked for them. And then I got a job at UC Berkeley. And that's where I've been mostly since then, in various different capacities. I went to Texas for a year and a half, came back. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. Currently, what I do is I work with all of our subject liaisons. So librarians at Berkeley are responsible for various subjects, like you've heard from other folks here. And they do work with faculty, with the students. I work with them to how to best build the collection, ways that we could actually do this in a more cost-effective measure. I still do a little reference when it comes to working with students needing government information from the federal government. Still talk to classes every now and then, particularly around the census. I've done a lot of data work in my background because of this, been exposed to data. And like Katie says, it's constant learning. You're always learning new things.
Very true. Thank you for that. The next question is for Alyssa and Todd, and it's what steps did you take or questions did you ask yourself to ensure librarianship would be the best career choice for you?
Well, I guess I already mentioned a couple of these things, but some other things I did is for one thing, I knew that I liked working with people, and that you don't have to necessarily like that to go into librarianship. There's always going to be some interaction with people, but I really wanted to work with like the public specifically. And so by talking to like the university librarian, the public librarian, I tried to kind of seek out people in the profession that were in a part of the like library world that I might like to go into. And also, honestly, just like getting the experience from graduate school helped me to like feel that, okay, this is a choice that is going to work out for me. I did also do reference in graduate school. So this reference is very much like the front lines. We're just like anyone can kind of walk into the library, ask you any question, which that novelty for some people is a little scary, but for me, I just kind of find it exciting. I never know what research projects someone will be working on or what they'll need to know. I mean, they might just need to know where the bathroom is, but that's fine too. And so I think by talking to people that were in those more public facing roles was a way that I could identify that I was going to be happy with this work. So yeah, I'd really like for people who are thinking about it, I would recommend like if you can do a little bit of job shadowing or maybe just conversations. I mean, events like this, obviously you're already taking steps to engage with folks that are doing the work. But I found it really helpful not to, I guess, further promote what the panel is doing, but this is what worked for me. So that's why I was glad to give back also.
So I kind of agree with Alyssa to some degree that a lot of my finding how to work in libraries is kind of a lot of it was for me was kind of talking. While I was in library school, I happened to have a mentor that I talked with that was a librarian, they were a community librarian, and I really enjoyed how the fact that they operate as a librarian, they really opened me up to the amount of diversity and ways you can take librarianship. One of the things that I really like about the work that I do now is that, or the work that I've done is that I've worked in many different types of libraries, many different types of formats, and in my time I've realized that it kind of helped me help my curiosity. I'm curious about things, so I can find stuff about, I want to know about different music or different fields or whatever. I can use it to find information about different fields. For instance, even reference. When I started in working in libraries, I worked at a reference desk where you had reference questions where people would ask a question and you'd have to. This is before the days of the internet as we had it now. But you'd have to figure out questions. You have to use actually readers' guides and figure out stuff. And I kind of like the idea of sort of finding stuff and being a detective and sort of using my skills to find information. So a lot of it, I think, my interest was in librarianship was kind of curiosity. I also one of the things that I've also liked over time is that I had the ability. I found I've had a lot of pliability with my library degree of sorts to use other fields. I've worked in public libraries, I've worked in special libraries, I've worked in, for business, done some government document stuff, I've done some cataloging. You can do a little bit of everything and you can kind of extend yourself into different fields within librarianship. So if you're interested in art, there's art librarianship. If you're interested in music, there's music. If you're interested in government documents, if you're interested in museums, there's so many different ways you can do it. You can also the ability to kind of, to experience different aspects of librarianship and not just be poured into one area, unless you like it. You enjoy one aspect of it, you can do that research. If you enjoy public service, you can do that. If you like instruction, you can do that. But you also have the option in many cases to sort of move between different worlds. And that's one of the things that I really got appreciate about librarianship over time. Initially, I was kind of like, well, I'll be a reference librarian. I'll just answer reference questions, deal with the public, which is fine. But eventually I said, I really like doing stuff in performing arts. So I did that for a period of time. So I was able to look into that. And now I'm sort of looking more in the field of education. So I'm looking in terms of that. So, I enjoy the aspect of having many paths within librarianship. So I'm not stuck in one particular path.
Can I just add on to that too, and just say that for those who aren't feeling like the public facing aspect of it, there is also a technical piece of this too, where you help sustain the organization in terms of database and acquisition development and cataloging, and that requires a lot of like detailed expertise. And it's not necessarily public facing, but it's very much an integral part of libraries. So there's still that aspect too. So like Todd was saying, there's all these spaces that you can kind of, figure out where you fit within. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. The next question is for Katie and Jesse. It's librarian positions are generally multifaceted. How do you handle all your responsibilities?
This one's tricky. Practically, I use a lot of to-do lists where I build in time for to prepare for things. Like if I'm going to teach, I have a note 2 weeks out that I need to prepare for this class, color-coded calendars. But also in academic libraries, it helps to use the ebb and flow of like the academic calendar to plan big projects into the year. So when there's a downtime, I do a lot of my research over the summer when I'm not teaching as much. Big collection development projects like weeding, going through collections and deciding what is no longer useful to our collections and removing them is a project we do pretty regularly. Serials reviews, so looking at our journal subscriptions and deciding, do we have what we need? What do we need? What is no longer relevant? Those projects that take a lot of time intensive focus tend to happen at downtimes during the academic year. So I try to be strategic with my time. Sometimes I had an undergraduate advisor that advised us to look at all of our projects and do sort of the emergency room triage on them and what is bleeding out the most and use that to decide what. Sometimes that's what you're doing. You're picking the thing that needs doing the most. But I think the variety of work that we do in a day helps prevent boredom for me. So sometimes it's just shifting my tasks around. I've worked on this for 2 hours. Now I can work on this for an hour. Now I can work on this for an hour, and prioritizing things that way.
I agree with Katie. The triaging really kind of helps. Like, this needs a lot of time. Let's take care of that first. This is quick. Let's take care of that after. I do a lot of creative calendaring with my calendar. So I'll take time and block things off on my calendar where I know something I need to work on. My calendar is open to my colleagues so they can see what I'm working on. So if they need to schedule something and they see that I have focus time in my calendar blocked off, they know it's okay to schedule something at that time. It is kind of interesting to see how much you can do in a week. So there are some weeks where I will talk to like 3 or 4 classes in a week. And then there's the next week where I'm in meetings for 30 hours a week. And then the next week I'm meeting with students from the class that I talked to the week before. So there's all that just all kind of ebbs and flows with the calendar, with the school year. I think one of the other things that I think a lot of people don't realize is libraries can be kind of underfunded. And so that allows you, if you're curious, to take on other responsibilities to see if you kind of want to try it out. So last year we had a licensing person leave and we weren't able to hire. And so my supervisor put together a team and I'd never done licensing for e-resources. So when we get a new subscription or a new database, we have to sign a license off to find who can use it, what they can do with it. And so this was something that I picked up and decided I like. So last week I worked on a couple licenses. Never changes.
Yes. And maybe too, like, we say that our calendar is busy, and outside of, like, what are some of those things besides meetings? Like, what are some of those things that they entail for those who aren't in the library field and are curious? What do some of those meetings entail? What do some of those experiences, mean? What is it? What do we do?
I am looking at my calendar for this week. Yesterday, most of my day was co-teaching 2 classes in special collections, which involved setting up the classroom, working with the special collections librarian to get all the books out on the tables, and then reboxed up and put back in the cart, back into the special collections for to be stored in the closed stacks. This morning I had a department meeting. I worked with another class. I spent the afternoon, I chair sort of our library equivalent of a promotion and tenure committee. So I spent the afternoon reading annual reviews because we're in that season for us right now. And then I have this panel right now. Tomorrow I have got a one-on-one with my supervisor, and I am doing reference, and I have a meeting with a student, and I have a collection meeting. So this is kind of a little bit through the day. The meetings can be anything from collections to planning classes that you're co-teaching to we just became members of Hadi Trust. So we're setting up information and libguides to distribute out to research guides to our faculty members. A lot of the meetings for me are project-based. Other folks might have other answers to that, though.
My calendar shows I had a meeting. Speaking of HathiTrust, I'm on an advisory committee for HathiTrust on shared print collections. So that was last Monday. I taught a class after that on how to use the census to discover things about population and population changes. The next day, I had a meeting with a vendor because we have a researcher who wants to get some of the underlying data from behind it, from the database, and use it in their project. And we're trying to figure out if our license will accommodate that. So things like that, a lot of stuff like that happens.
Okay. So the next question would be, what are some of the challenges that go along with being a librarian? And that's for Katie and Alyssa.
I mean, I can kind of guess some of them from what I've been saying. My biggest challenge right now is balancing the work and kind of guarding against burnout. In my library, especially, we've been sort of in do more with less mode since sort of 2008, 2009. And we're starting to get to a point where some of that's starting to break. As far as like positions not getting filled, and we're all asked to do additional responsibilities, but we're all kind of topped up and busy now. So that's a challenge. Along with that, we've got, I forget who mentioned budgets and underfunding. We have had a flat budget almost entirely the entire time I've been here. So with like, if you think of the inflation and serial costs, so in journals and database costs, those go up every year. So with a flat budget, that's functionally a budget cut. So we've had to carefully manage our collections. In Ohio, we have had a series of proposed state legislation that would restrict academic freedom in the state and in higher ed specifically. That's a huge challenge to higher ed more broadly, but also will affect libraries. And then, of course, like we have things like new technologies and like AI. How will AI shift the research process? What is the role of libraries in that? I've spent some time in the last year working with other librarians and faculty on campus to look at the ways we can use AI to teach critical thinking, research skills. And so that's a challenge I think that is really going to shift some of what we do.
Yeah, I agree. I think Katie has touched on a lot of the big challenges that will pop up. I honestly, something else that I discuss with people periodically, in particular, a couple friends of mine who have left the library profession to work for vendors that like make products for libraries, which is another place a lot of people with library degrees will work. But they like to talk about how honestly, we're not very good at communicating like what is a librarian anymore. And I don't think that's a blame on us so much as just like there's so many things a librarian can be, and just so many changing things, like Katie mentioned, AI and all of the new things cropping up. There's, data science librarians now that, there's all kinds of new librarians that didn't used to be positions 20 years ago. So I think just continuing to be able to communicate like to our campus communities, to our wider community, like what on earth are we doing, the value of the libraries. I think these are conversations that are being had as well. And also just kind of one of the tricks. So I try to practice a little bit how to like talk about what my job, because also our jobs are so varied that it's like it's very hard to sum up in like a couple of paragraphs, this is what I do, because yeah, every meeting is different, every week is different, and I love the variety, but it is a little hard to sum up without just saying like, well, I support graduate student and faculty research, and it's like, well, what does that entail? What does that look like? So I think that will continue to be a challenge going forward as well. And it's not a bad challenge. I think it's a challenge we are up for. But just kind of thinking about how to tell people the value of our profession.
And I agree with you saying with people sort of not really understanding our value. I think a lot of times people still, you know, people who work in libraries kind of understand, but someone who works outside the library thinks, "Oh, you do a lot of books," and yeah, I do, but there's so much more to that. And I think if you only think of the library as just, oh, it's just a place for books, well, that's sort of a very narrow way of thinking about a library, and it's so much more than that. It's obviously a place. It can serve as a community place. It can serve as a hub. Our particular library is a hub on campus. We're probably the most busy place on our entire campus. It's one thing to know exactly what librarians do and the importance of what we do. Another thing I think I find sometimes is that, and maybe it's not the case in all libraries, but I think within maybe this particular system, our system, is that we tend to, there's a whole thing of doing more with less. And I think sometimes when you do more with less, you're kind of teaching people to overwork you. If I am running with two legs and they say, well, we have to bind one leg and you still run with the one leg, and then they continue to, you're showing that you can still run with it. You're not showing your you know that you're not showing it that this hurts you, that you need more help or you need more services. I think that a lot of times librarians don't haven't been the best advocates for their own work, their own selves. I think we get kind of lumped behind, some of us are not faculty, some are considered faculty. I think part of that has to do with sort of not with being accommodating and not standing up for what things you do and realizing that what we do has value. For instance, information literacy is a huge aspect. You look particularly now with say AI, with terms of also things like that, information critical thinking. Those are important aspects of it, and should be at the forefront of that. And I don't think we are always there. So I think a challenge for the library field is to kind of find its own way to sort of be your own advocates, our best advocates, as opposed to having someone be an advocate and work behind us. So
Yes, to piggyback on that, the question I had was, how do you advocate for your expertise in this information landscape? I think that's something that librarians contend with, because it's like people don't realize that our whole job is to understand all modalities of information and how to utilize that to help you critically get what you need. And I think that, based on many different things, that's kind of like a struggle that we have, is getting people to understand that we are experts in that space. So thank you for that. That was a good one. The next question is, what have you enjoyed most about being a librarian?
You can go first. There's been a lot of things that I've really enjoyed about being a librarian. Um, First is that helping people aspect of it. There have been many times where I'm working with a student, an undergrad student, a graduate student, a faculty member, or even someone from outside the university, a community member, and they come in with a research idea and they don't know if what they want to do is actually possible given what type of information is out there. And after a conversation, they leave with a very big smile on their face because they realize that this idea that was kind of like this thought in the back of their head that, oh, if I had time to do this, I might think about that, is actually possible with the sources that we have. And so that's always fun to see. Um, Been able to meet a lot of really amazing people doing really great work around the country, through going to conferences, talking with folks over coffee at conferences, over dinners and happy hours and breakfasts and everything else that goes along with some of this work that happens at conferences. That's been really eye-opening and very satisfying. Um, and one of the things that when I worked for the vendor was being able to travel around the country. Um, in 18 months, I went to 15 states. I didn't do that before growing up. No one traveled where I was from, and so to be able to do that after getting my master's and that being my first professional job, that was kind of fun to do.
um, just again to piggyback on what Jesse was saying, There's a few things for me. It's obviously work with people. I definitely enjoyed work with people. I think where I'm at currently kind of is allows me the ability to interact with people from all stages in life, from instructors, professors to people who are returning students, to older students, to younger students. So I enjoy the idea of dealing with different types of people in different situations and different cultures and which goes. So that's a big thing of interest to me. I mentioned earlier that a lot of times with by nature I'm rather curious. So being a librarian helps me sort of be able to sort of soothe that curiousness. I can go, hey, I really like this subject, so I can find some information about this subject and use it for that aspect. And I have the ability to kind of sort of venture into different fields. I enjoy. I think someone asked earlier about moving from different libraries. I know it used to be very, very stiff. You couldn't go from academic to public or vice versa. And my thinking is that there's less of that nowadays. So you have the ability to kind of say, I've worked, Jesse, you worked as a vendor. If you go from vendoring to librarian, then to academic or in the public, you have that ability. So I like the ability to not just, even if I have one track I want to go on, I want to be reference librarian. Maybe a few years down the road, I'm tired of it. I want to go into tech services. I maybe want to go into the vendorship field. Or maybe want to go, from something not necessarily libraries, but a different field. Librarianship has that pliability to for you to be able to try and go in different aspects of it and then not, and to still be within the field. So that's a lot what I get out of it.
Did any of the other panelists want to share what they enjoy most?
I mean, I'll echo what everybody else said. Librarians are a great bunch of people for the most part, and I enjoy the collegial environment where I'm working. And was it Jesse who mentioned the conferences and getting involved with professional organizations has been another avenue of that for me. I do like the variety of the day to day. I'm never just sat at a desk all day, every day, which is nice. I really do like, I mentioned this earlier, the intellectual curiosity of it, right? Like I'm not bored. And so I'm always constantly getting, somebody comes in with a topic, it could be anything, and getting to dive a little bit in and learning something every day, which I think is fun.
Just related to, can you move around? I have a colleague who their former career, they were a theatrical wig maker and now they are a business librarian. So I agree with Todd that there is more ability to do that than there used to be.
I just wanted to share too that as some of y'all brought into this, that there's different aspects of librarianship. Like we're talking through this academic librarian phase now, but we have public libraries, we have special libraries, we have solo librarians and all these different things. So it spans across the field. I had a friend who was a librarian who worked in Hollywood and worked for Oprah and things like that. So, I mean, when I tell you that librarians are everywhere, it's not just limited to these, like certain spaces. You'd be surprised, like wherever people need to kind of aggregate information, you will see someone with this skill set there. Okay. I also wanted to ask the next question was, what do you see as the future of librarianship as a profession?
This one's tricky. Kind of what you said just now about wherever information is aggregated, people with this skill set are there. And the nature of information is shifting rapidly right now. So it's hard to know. But to me, that's interesting and exciting because our skill set is not set in stone. We continue to develop, we continue to learn, and these skills are useful in a multitude of contexts. So I don't know where it's going, is my short answer, but I think that there is an opportunity for us in that changing environment.
Yeah, I agree with Katie. I mean, there are with any, rise in various new technologies, there's going to be fear mongering about existing professions and how the work is being done. But librarians, we're adaptable. We always said, I think we will always continue to be. And people tell me every year that they like the cleanness, humanness, and what you get coming to the library. Obviously, we have resources, we have articles and books, things to engage, also the people. And I think because we're curious people and we're interested people and we're partners in the work that you're doing. And of course, this is most true at academic library, but also at public libraries. You're not just getting, information spat back out of a chat box. We care about the work you're doing and are, interested in the work that you're doing. So I find that those social relational connections are one of the strong parts of librarianship that I think will continue. And so I am equally certain that there will be some fear about the profession, and as I am certain that the profession will continue in all kinds of ways. So I think the future is bright. It's just going to look different from maybe how it has looked in the last couple decades.
Todd or
Actually, sorry, as Alyssa was talking, it made me think of my favorite answer to this is if you've seen the movie Desk Set with, who is it? Katharine Hepburn. It's like a 1940s movie where a computer is being brought into a library and it was going to make the librarians obsolete. So this is not this is a question that has been asked for literally generations of librarians, and we've continued to adapt.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to mention that. You think about it previous to this sort of information digital age, librarians, were taught to answer questions. Okay, where is this at? How can I find this? Do you know the answer to this question? And a lot of reference was based on reference. And I, with the future, I pretty much, with the way things are, I pretty much don't do much of that now, at least in terms of answering those type of questions. But because you have so much information, it's finding the right answer to the question. There's so much more information. So a lot of times with your skills aren't necessarily used for finding that information, but finding the right answer, going through a lot of, fake news to find real news or whatever else to be, and I think as a field, it constantly has to evolve. I know one of the things that our current library is doing that I really enjoyed is that we're working with different departments. We have started a collection of we have a 3D printer and we're doing stuff with AI. We have different drones and different things that they can lend out to different departments. And so instead of just being that place that has books or articles, whatever have you, we can have different sorts of materials that people can use. And even in public libraries, they have all sorts of things that patrons can use. If even if it's just tickets to a park, but being that not just being the place for books, but being the place where people can have different services, they can do different things, that they can access different materials. So I think it's constantly changing. I think you don't want to particularly stay in the same one box. I think to expand and sort of look at the range of wide disparity of things that libraries can do. So I think it's a pretty good place, I believe.
I think that there's always going to be a need for libraries. We're always coming up with new formats of things that need to be collected and preserved and shared. 20, 30 years ago, it was books and journals in print. And then the internet started coming on and they started making these things accessible. And as time has moved on, libraries have been collecting things like data sets more, and image files and PDF files in ways that they weren't doing before. And so I think as technology evolves, there's always going to be a need to figure this stuff out and to save it, preserve it, make it available. But there's also a thing about preserving the legacy print collections that are in many of the academic libraries across the country and the public libraries, the larger public libraries. How do we work with these things to make sure that they're preserved? There's discussions about things like shared print, where libraries go in together on preserving one library takes these titles, one library takes these titles, and how do you manage that going forward? I think those are interesting questions that are going to help drive the profession in collection development, things like that.
I think too that we also think about as we learn more and this information becomes more available, it's making sure that everyone's voice is heard, because for a time we depended upon what we thought the canon was. It's only this one thing, but are we, like including everyone's voices and ensuring we do that in in all these information mediums to make sure that we are getting that, that full thought and breadth of information available. So that's something that we think about all the time as well. Are we collecting, the voices that need to be here and discussing those things and the difficult ideas of when they talk about censorship and like whose voice needs to be heard and what do we do with those difficult statements that are sometimes made within books? Like, how do we contend with that? Those are things that, librarians are on the, on the front, like dealing with some of these issues. So that's kind of some of the interesting things as well. I wanted to take a moment now to, was there anything else that y'all wanted to chime in on, any aspect of the questions that were asked before we go into Q&A? Is there anything else that the panelists wanted to share?
Tiffeni, you brought up something really important about making sure that everyone's voice is heard and preserved in certain ways. And I think along with that is making sure that the voice is heard and described in the record in a way that honors the group of people or the person who said it. For years, libraries didn't do that, and there's a lot of thinking around how to fix that, how to go back and make sure that these things are done in a way that is not offensive, that is acceptable, that's open to everyone.
Yes, very good. Thank you so much for that, Jessica. I appreciate that. So Katie, did you want to share something?
I was basically going to say something similar to what Jesse said, that especially working with the areas I work with, the whole concept, I've heard it described as bibliodiversity, but I think it's bigger than that. Especially with things like subject headings, and these things are slowly moving processes, but just seeing it's frustrating sometimes that it is so slowly changing, but those efforts are out there. There are grassroots campaigns too, like as Jesse was saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So we can, at this moment, we want to take your questions. So with all that was said, if y'all wanted to drop some questions into the Q&A chat, and I will go and start to pull them together. The first one, Sadasha asked this, I believe, and I wanted to pose this to the panel. She asked, what is the biggest difference between a public and academic library? So could some of y'all hop in as a panelist and explain that?
People are welcome to, Todd, go ahead. Okay, well, feel free to weigh in as well. I was going to say people may disagree, but I feel like the collections and the population you serve are probably the two biggest ways to kind of determine what your library is. So like a public library is going to be open to all, generally, people in the community. There might be some amount of like, oh, you need to live in the city to use it, but for the most part, most anyone should be able to be a borrower or a user of the collections there. So the services and the focus of everything there will be different, and the collections are often more, for pleasure reading or for learning new skills or for children or teens. So more kind of broad collections meant to pique the interest of the community and hopefully, ideally, a little bit developed by the community as well. Whereas academic libraries are going to be more focused on like the research needs of the university and things happening here. And the population that you mainly serve is the university community. I'm at a public institution and we do also serve the public. So it kind of depends on the school that you're at and how that works. That can be different for different academic libraries, but we also have researchers from elsewhere that come here. And we also have any Indiana resident can get a library card to our library as well. And then I think special libraries were referenced also, and that can mean a lot of things. We do even, for example, have like a rare books library here on campus that would technically be considered a special library. So they have like a very discrete collection that's unique. And they focus in one area. But there's lots of other ways that special libraries can be defined, and I'm sure we would not have time to cover them all, but yeah, Todd, feel free to weigh in as well.
You covered a lot of what I was planning to say. A lot of public libraries obviously deal with more of the public, so you can have wide variety of people that use the library. Academic tends to be a little more, depending on what type of library you're at, tends to be a little more, I don't say homogeneous, but you have a less of a variety of different people. Where I'm at, which is a community college library, which is actually is a little bit sort of split between the two. So it's sort of a public library, people can use it, but it's also involved we have students and faculty as well. So we're sort of splitting between the heads in different places. Again, the thing that from my personal point of view that I've noticed is that like when I worked in public library, I knew like all the bestsellers. I would like people come in and say, "Hey, what book can you recommend?" And I go, "This book and that book." Now, I have wouldn't know one from the other. I know some with very little, and it's stuff like that. It's usually academic libraries do a little more. You may do more teaching. You may do instruction. You may do you may be considered faculty, whereas a public library you may do programming. So you may have a particular program that deals with the public. So they each have their own particular place. And special libraries it kind of depends what you're doing. Special libraries could be if you work in a law firm, they have a librarian, or if you have different companies have their own. One time they did, have their own specific librarian for their own particular field. So if there's chemistry, whatever, or whatever field, they may have a librarian that is a particular field, or a law librarian, what have you. So it does have different varieties. And again, depending on the library you're at, what type of institution you're at, it's going to vary. You may have some that are academic that do serve the public, and then you have some, the public that has the academic value. So it depends. It does depend, but there are some distinct differences between the two.
Just for the quirky side of it, go to LinkedIn and just search librarian. I believe like a couple months ago, Skechers was hiring for a librarian to like catalog their shoes and different things like that. So it's just like it's always interesting to see what's available out here for librarians. Like I said, there's some interesting positions out there sometimes, and there's someone to fill it, which is even more interesting. One of the questions that y'all asked was, is it easy to try different librarian type positions in other fields? Many of us are branded early on, and it's difficult to switch areas. What are your thoughts about that, y'all?
I think it depends a little bit on what you might be interested in and what the need of the organization that you're working at, what they might be able to do some flexibility with. I've been lucky enough to work at institutions where if I expressed a need about something I wanted to learn, that I was able to either shadow someone for a day or two to get some ideas or to actually work in the area. And one of the things about us libraries being constantly under budget cuts, sometimes the work needs to be shared. And if you're interested in something, you can volunteer, and that's on a case by case basis, because you don't want to volunteer for everything. But if you're interested in something, it could be something that could help you further down the road, and it's going to be hopefully be temporary if you're doing something in that capacity.
I'll echo that and say in my library, there is support for trying things. And if you do want to like, hey, I noticed this department needs help with that. Can I try for a while? I have not tried to switch around to like other departments. I've always been a subject librarian, but I think that's more of my preference rather than it's impossible to do.
Okay, let's see. This person asks, I wonder if all the participants could share maybe the top three expected outcomes of their role of the roles they have. The goal of this question being to get a sense of some of the responsibilities and expectations each type of librarian has. I could start with this one if you want, just to give out. So I'm a director at this point, and I'm an education librarian. So I left the field. I was an academic librarian, left the field, became a school teacher, and came back and things like that. So I'm in a school of education as a librarian. But my biggest job is to, like I was saying before, is to advocate for the library and the resources that we have. That's my sole job. And I go out into the community and I partner with folks. Like we partner with the National African American Music Museum and we do their lesson plans. We are, like creating like a database of lesson plans, an open access one. So believe me that there is a social entrepreneurship in this. Like, and that's part of my role is to get people to see libraries. This is in an administrator level, but like it's taking all that subject expertise and advocating for information is what my goal is. Like, and then strategically, that's what, my role is, I would say.
It's hard for me to pick three, but I have, I'd say around five primary professional responsibilities. So the five main parts of my main job are collection development, engagement, which is the liaison role, going out and working with my departments, instruction, so working with classes in my liaison areas, teaching the information literacy skills, reference, which we've talked about a lot. What's the fifth one? I'm blanking. But that's sort of the main things that day to day I'm expected to be working on.
I mean, I'm kind of the same boat as you, Katie, in terms of what things, what my three, I won't say goals, but things that I normally do. I'm sort of in charge of basically programming, so we're creating our program. So I'm kind of the one who kind of does the assessment. So how many classes we have, did they learn, what needs to be taught. So I'm kind of in charge of that. So that's one sort of sub aspect of it. I also do instruction, so I'm doing instruction. Uh, Reference, dealing with the public, dealing with students or dealing with faculty. That's another aspect of my job. Am I, am I able to deal with the faculty or connect with faculty? Also reaching out to faculty in terms of being liaison work, dealing with the faculty, finding out materials they need, finding out if they need instruction, what type of instruction do they need? That kind of relates to instruction. And also another thing that from my end and as a librarian is outreach, sort of looking at being I would say an ambassador for the library, so to speak, on campus. You want to try and make sure that the library has that people recognize that the faculty will recognize, hey, look, we have these new materials, we have these things you can do, we have these resources you can use. So it's a bunch of things along those lines that I would say I deal with, and probably a few more, but that's what I come up right now.
Mine would be similar to what Todd and Katie have said in some aspects. How many classes have I taught? How many consultations with students and faculty have I done? There's lots of like numerical things that would be counted, like, to measure the work that I've done. But there's an attempt at a focus on non-numerical around here too. So, like what was the impact of this particular thing? Like, oh, maybe this spawned a new initiative, or maybe this happened because of work that you did. So I certainly would be assessed on numerical things, but also, just like kind of how the library's role in the campus community would be impacted by work that is being done by me and people working with me.
Mine's a little weird to describe because a lot of what I do is with not just me doing it, it's a group of people doing it. So we do a lot of collection work and collection budgeting. So did we spend the budget on time and what were you able to buy. Part of my job is managing the approval plan that we have. And if you're not familiar with an approval plan, it's an automated way to bring in books to the library based on price, subject area, publisher, and a bunch of other aspects. And part of my job is managing that, making sure did it work in a way that came in under budget or within. Um, Working with classes like others. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we do that's very team based. And so am I contributing to the team?
I muted myself. Sorry. I have a question here. It says, are there now remote work opportunities in libraries? For example, remote cataloging work.
We did a little bit of remote cataloging work during the pandemic when everything was closed. We had someone come in and scan pages of title pages and other things to do cataloging work. They don't do that as much anymore. The special collections folks, it was a lot of work for them to do that, and it didn't really, the workflow didn't actually work. But I've heard of other places where this is a little more in line with stuff. I do a lot of remote work because most of the work I can do from my computer. I go in 1 or 2 days a week, and the rest of the time I'm remote.
I would say that somewhat remote is quite common, and fully remote is pretty uncommon in my experience. A lot of folks I've known who wanted fully remote have gone more to the vendor side, the corporate side. I think just kind of we're still so tied to our, communities that we're working within. It's a little hard to fully get away. That said, we do have a couple of faculty librarians here that are fully remote. One of them lives in Louisville, so and we're in Bloomington, Indiana. So it's not impossible, but if you're going into the profession looking just specifically for those jobs, it's going to be very tight to find them.
Yeah, I think the only person who's fully remote for us is a system administrator. So I think, yeah, it's easier if, I guess, if you're behind the scenes and not working with the communities face to face as much. But I've just lost my train of thought, but yeah.
So I'll just come out of my lurking mode and somewhat answer this. If you want to be in librarianship and you want to work remotely full time, then you really need to go into the tech side of it. So it's the IT people, it's the programmers, and sometimes it's people that do things like OER. Those are the positions that really, within librarianship itself, will allow you to do that. If you're looking for librarianship and outside of kind of the traditional public library or academic library, then like it was previously said, vendors, bibliographic utilities like OCLC, trying to get with one of the vendors or publishers like ProQuest or whatever as a trainer, things of that nature is probably where you're going to focus more on if you're trying to get like 100% remote job.
Yes. There's a question here that says, on a more logistical employment question, are any of the librarians part of unions that protect their labor rights?
I'm an interesting person to talk to about this because we are smack in the middle of it right now. We voted to unionize last year, I guess now, and we are in the process of negotiating our first librarian contract. Our next session is in 3 days on Friday. So yes, there are librarian unions, but not everywhere.
University of California has a union for librarians, and the California State Universities also have a union, but they're with their faculty. It's a combined union, but we have our own separate union within the librarians for UC.
So
So we're also unionized, but our union is part of a larger union. So, but most, I'm not sure if at least number of the libraries within the state are.
Yes.
So
I'm at Will, so I'm in the South, but you'll find more of that. It kind of works along some of those lines as well. And public libraries also can have unions and not just.
So I will say that Northwestern University unionized. They went through the process that Katie's going through now, and I don't think it's even been more than a year. But the interesting part is that within kind of the faculty realm, they are the only ones that unionize. So there's nobody else at the academic level that has unionized but them, and they voted for it. And so it's now in place and instituted after the negotiations.
Okay. There's also a question here that says, are there pathways to becoming a librarian from a PhD and not an info science degree? Or is a library degree 100% required?
Most places will accept a PhD in the related field. Like we have subject librarians here. Like at one point we had a history librarian with a PhD in history, South Asian studies with a PhD in that area. So yes, I can't say that that's the case everywhere, but it is often a path. Although it's I wouldn't recommend that as the first choice path if you're already considering librarianship. It's kind of a turnaround into a slightly different career.
And I would say what Alyssa mentioned seems to be more the exception than the rule where I'm at. It's you need the MLS, MLIS. Every position we post requires it. So I think it to some extent depends on the institution.
There's also institutions where you will not, well, it depends. But there are situations where they will take people with the work experience, with a significant amount of work experience. But if you're trying to be a subject specialist, I would not suggest going down that road. You probably do need the MLS or, a PhD in a specific subject.
Yeah, I have a job opening soon and it's just experience and skill set. And it's because we're trying to open up to that new wave of thought of positioning, but it's often controversial in this because some people, like the master's degree is that pedigree and understanding the information landscape. So it's like, how do you get that? So you will see like different schools of thought on that. Let's see here. Can you speak more about the positions that are not public facing, especially not in public or academic librarianship? Or could you share where I could find info on that?
So outside of technical services where you have acquisitions and the people that are helping you acquire the materials and the items in the library that help with the research. And those materials could be print, they could be databases, they could be electronics. So then you have the catalogers, the people who are essentially cataloging the books so you can actually, or other materials too, in print and electronic, and even sound recordings and microfiche and tons of other things where you can find things. Those are the two that, in traditional librarianship are the ones that are behind the scenes. But then also, of course, with all the IT things, that is another area. But I think the other area where I don't know if it's a behind the scenes thing, but it's not your traditional reference, subject specialist thing is, I think the big thing would be scholarly communications, where you're doing things like OER, where you're doing like with what Alyssa helps with the evidence. The word has just left my mind, Alyssa. But all of these type of things with working in the institutional repository and things like that, I think it has a certain level of public of interacting with the public or specific groups like faculty, but it's not as forward facing as like say being a subject specialist or being a reference librarian or being a public services librarian. I think the more you become a functional specialist, it gets to be a little bit more different.
think too, there's those fields that, and I had to Google to jog my memory too. There's like indexers, which those are some remote positions too. I've also seen people that are in that informationist or information specialist field, research analysts. That's like one that I've seen folks go into that's kind of different. Editors, they say, it's like, so it's that kind of that there's this blending thing that I've seen that's kind of non-traditional in terms of um librarianship as well. I'm going to drop a link in here, and it doesn't explain everything, but it should give some offshoots. It's ALA's page on like on the education and careers, that you can kind of dabble in that and kind of use the American Library Association page as your jump off point to kind of begin that, like exploring those different avenues as well.
Yeah, I would also throw in, I don't know if you mentioned it, but systems librarians, they tend to be more not front facing. So, but depending on where you're at, they may have some, but generally they tend to be more behind the scenes dealing with library systems. So that stuff too as well.
And some of the processing archivists, people who do the archival stuff, but behind the scenes, they don't always interact with the public, but they might, depending on the collection they're processing.
Here's one that'll take us back. What does applying to an MLS program entail?
Mine's been so long ago now that I'm not sure my information is relevant anymore.
I was going to say, I might boldly assume I'm closest to having gone through that process. Some programs require the GRE, some do not. I chose to apply to all programs that didn't. So, kind of up to you where you want to go geographically and what their requirements are. I mean, it's pretty standard to other grad schools. There's like an essay, you have to submit your transcripts. I don't know what else would be helpful to know, but yes, sometimes a test, sometimes not. And then you're kind of general, you do have to have like academic references and your transcripts and your essay and all of that. And it's not like some graduate schools where I have not heard of a library school that really gives like funding packages, which is how a lot of other grad schools work, where, you might get a job guaranteed with your admission or something. It is still a field where you have to do a little more work if you want to get funding for your program, which I would recommend doing the work. If you can, not go into debt for your library degree, that is definitely preferable. Some schools have assistantships, which would pay a portion of your tuition. A lot of places hire graduate students in the libraries or in other areas. So there's different ways programs manage funding, but definitely looking into those is recommended. So I hope that's helpful, and could ask a clarifying question if there's stuff I didn't cover.
Well, I think what I'll mention,
electric typewriter, I was going to say to the people as well, there are strictly online programs too. So there's that, but go ahead, Katie.
No, that was literally what I was going to say. Go ahead.
I was also going to say that I think going in and coming out are two kind of different things, in the sense that, I don't know, I'll get some feedback on Todd on this. I think going into library school, I was fortunate where, I already had a master's degree. And so my MLS was my second one. And also I spoke another language and did a study abroad and did all these things that kind of made me at that point in time kind of more unique as a candidate. But coming out and getting the first job is a lot different, in the sense that I think it would be tougher for me to get this first job now, because now everybody is a part of the, whatever, the ALA student group where they were the the chair, and everybody's already been writing articles and doing this with faculty and everything like that. So kind of the unicorn that Todd and I were then, coming out and getting jobs and, being these individuals, is probably, we would not be those unicorns with what we have at that point in time today.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the things that I was thinking that when we were in at Southern, one of the things they were asking me what track you want to be on. Were you going to be on the academic track or the special library track, or I don't know if they still have that same sort of, I don't know, bifurcated look in terms of librarianship. I do think that it's a little more broad in terms of what you can study, what you can learn. Also think as the one thing that's as this benefit now is that you have a lot more options. You have online options. When I went, there was just, we went to school in Connecticut. It was one school in Connecticut, that was it. Now you have online options, you can mix it around, you can try different places. So you have a lot more in terms of options. And I think finding the right school that's best for your particular needs, what you're looking for in terms of librarianship. If you look, I want to, I need something that's relatively inexpensive and it's close by, that's an option. But if you are like, look, I have worked in a library and I really want to be on the cutting edge, and you want to look at what libraries are doing, what library schools are doing, stuff that are closely aligned with that. So one thing I would advise any potential library student or library students to think about you know, what they want from a library degree. Are they, do they really want to, look really being cutting edge to find out what's going on? Do they really look for something that's maybe inexpensive, close to home? And you have a lot more options these days, particularly with online options. So,
But I also think, to kind of follow up with what you said, Todd, when we went to school, there were also certain types of people that were being tracked into certain areas.
right.
So the thing is, to put that politely, and so the thing also is what you choose to do, what you've made up your mind to do, you need to also be able to advocate for yourself and kind of stick to that.
Right.
That doesn't mean you can't be flexible in what you want to do, but if you're not going to be happy in the public libraries, then you're not going to be happy, and you're going to stick to academic, and that's your track. And don't be swayed from that, even though there are tons of things that you could do academically. So be flexible, but you should also kind of stick to what is for you.
Someone put in the chat, make sure it's an accredited program, and I would say that yes, that's important as well.
Yes.
One of the kind of ways to think about this too is look for schools with tuition remission or tuition programs. And for those people that are like on a budget, get into a job, do they have tuition remission, and look at the library schools around you and what's available. If that's an issue, sometimes you have to look at how to work the angle differently. And, like how much tuition remission do you get? So if the scholarships and financial aid aren't available, is there a school that you can work at just to get the tuition remission to be able to do, like a library program? So that's kind of like another hack that you can kind of, work out. If let's see here, another question, and I think we're any certifications you all recommend?
To get in or to get a job or?
Sure. Does
Yeah.
whoever asked that, do you want to expound on that a little bit? Here's one. What has it been to hone your instruction, teaching, or breaking of information skills? What circumstances have helped you improve being able to relate information to different audiences you work with?
Hold on just for 1 second. I'm going to follow up with the previous question. It kind of depends on what you want. So, for example, if you want to be this is the previous question. If you want to be a law librarian, you're going to have a JD. There's certain library schools like Drexel where you can get certification if you want to go into like being a medical school librarian and things like that. So it kind of depends on what it is that you're wanting to do. There is, the one place in librarianship that people kind of call it almost like, the fifth or sixth librarian. That's not really a librarian, is when you're working in archives. So there's all types of certification for archives, working with Rare Books, things like that. Preservation librarianship is the same thing. So it kind of depends on what is it that you want to do. And Tiffeni, repeat that question again.
They were asking about instruction and says, what circumstances have helped you improve being able to relate information to different audiences you've worked with? How have you been able to hone your instruction skills?
So if you had asked me as an undergraduate even, uh, and even some in grad school, I was terrified to talk in front of people. So to a certain extent, it was throwing me off the deep end and forcing me to do it and face my fear. But my institution has a very robust peer review instruction, peer feedback for instruction. So having colleagues sit in and say, hey, you're doing these things really, really well, has one, helps you validate and gain confidence, but two, can like help you, well, maybe have you considered doing it this way? The other thing I will say is watching other people teach, especially people who are not remotely related to any of your subject areas, because you end up picking up skills that, like, oh, the biology librarian did this thing that I could totally use in a humanities class this way. So those were my biggies, is other people's feedback, but also watching other people to pull ideas.
So today in library schools, they actually have classes on education and instruction. Back in the dark ages, they didn't. So when I started, when I started my first job, there was a whole entire semester where I didn't teach. And I spent that semester first observing people, and then you ended up being kind of like the helper in the room. And then you moved on to co-teaching. And then you moved on to eventually teaching by yourself or teaching with a group for a specialized thing, like the history colloquium or something like that. But we were also very fortunate because when we started, that was the beginning of having like instruction coordinators. So sometimes there were a lot of scripts already prepared for certain types of class, like how to teach the library catalog, how to evaluate information sources and things like that. So it was more like a training on the job thing, more so than it is now when there are actually classes on instruction.
Another thing that I found that's kind of helpful, and it's kind of, if you're in an academic environment, I know that they do have a Center for Teaching, which has different resources for instructors that you can use, which would be very helpful. A lot, how I learned is basically just going in the deep end, figuring out, and you meet in another librarians, you kind of meet with them and see what they're doing, and also with your colleagues as well. If you're part of an association, group, you can learn what's happening there. Conferences are obviously very great as well in terms of getting tips and what have you. But yeah, if you're on campus, I'd say Center for Teaching is one thing you can use if your campus has that. I don't know if many campuses have that. But again, a lot of it is they have classes now which can help you out. But conferences are helpful. Different different conferences, different presentation, but different events that they have that deal with construction. So there's lots of different sources you can use now as well.
Yes. Don't be afraid of a feedback form from the actual class, because that's the quickest way I learned that I talk too fast. It's just those simple things, Charmaine, are we okay?
Yes, we're at time. We're actually at time. So Eli will finish up.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and jump in here because we are at 5:30, and to respect the panelists' time, spending the last hour and a half with us, I want to just send my very sincere thanks again to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us from institutions from around the country and different institution types and different kinds of jobs in the academic libraries. Thank you so much to our moderator today for leading the discussion, and a big thank you to Charmaine for organizing the panel and finding us these excellent speakers today. Just really sincere thanks to her and for putting this together. And on behalf of the Center for the Study of Global Change and the IU Library System, thank you all for attending. And this was an excellent discussion and just really spectacular questions too. So I really appreciate the depth of conversation, the range of topics we talked about today, and everyone's participation. So thanks again to everyone. And I would encourage everyone, if there's more questions that you have, please don't hesitate to reach out to also the librarians in your schools and communities. If you're between schools and you're considering librarianship, you can always reach out to your alma maters too. So if you're considering master's degrees, you can reach out to librarians at your undergrad institutions, and they will always be there for you too. Or if you're wanting to explore what public librarianship is, reaching out to the librarians local to you as well, and exploring what those possibilities might be in the communities that you want to work out in. The one thing about librarians is I've found that they are always super responsive and really great about doing what they do best, and that's getting you the information you need, including about the jobs. So thank you again for everyone's participation, and just thanks so much. And so we'll be wrapping up today. Thanks again, everyone.